We got Stewart Rhodes, founder and director of Oath Keepers, served as U.S. Army paratrooper. Stewart graduated from Yale Law School in 2004, also worked in the Ron Paul campaign and in the Ron Paul's congressional office in D.C. Oathkeepers.org is his website. And we've also got in train Brandon Smith with him, and also Michael-Boldin, the 10th Amendment Center, dealing with the state standing up to the federal government. The federal government itself sold out to the internationalist. Stewart, I want to get into the 10 orders you guys won't follow, how vital it is to reach out to military and police so they understand the authoritarian direction that's being engineered publicly here in the U.S. But before we go there, you've been listening the last hour off and on. As I went over the open announcement of the internet kill switch in place, even if Congress doesn't pass it, just like they're trying to shut down coal power plants, even if Congress won't pass it through the executive. Now an internet ID with private corporations administering it, but it being issued by the government, by Homeland Security, and they admit the IRS will track everything you do for your safety. I mean, this is total surveillance, Fourth Amendment violation. But if any of the states stand up and complain, they're not supposed to do that because according to the people who think the federal government's absolute power, the states have no rights. In fact, they shouldn't even exist. In fact, they don't exist.
That's right. They're trying to do the same thing to our states as was done in Nazi Germany, as was done in Russia, which has turned the states into powerless functionaries of the national government. And that's what they've done. They've taken all the power from the states, all the power from the people, and gathered it to Washington, D.C. So we have to sidestep that program and get back to our Constitution and revitalize our communities. And we need to have alternate communication systems, both in the form of ham radio, perhaps in the form of couriers. All of these things must be set up ahead of time, so when they pull the plug, it doesn't matter to us. We've got something else to go to.
Please continue.
And that's why we've launched Operation Sleeping Giant to wake up the veterans. That's our new website, www.operationsleepinggiant.org, and focused on the veterans because we believe that with the leadership of the veterans in communities and getting all the VFW halls, DAV, American Legion, etc. on board, they can then start to set up the communication networks. They've had the training. They understand what it's like to prepare for worst-case scenarios. I don't got to convince them that bad things can happen. They know. They've been trained to deal with it, and they can be leaders in their communities to revitalize the Republic from the bottom up. And we're working in close tandem with 10th Amendment Center and the Notify Now Tour because that is the constitutional remedy. It's not military coup. It's not just submitting. The constitutional remedy that Jefferson and Madison gave us was to go to the legislatures and say we are going to stand up and interpose ourselves between an abusive federal government and our people. We're going to.
And this hoax is run that we're going to need to have a new Abraham Lincoln invade the other states that don't go along with federal domination if the states do anything. I mean, I've seen MSNBC say the states are not allowed to even complain. The states have no power. They do not exist. The federal government is allowed to do whatever they want. There is no Bill of Rights. There is no Constitution. Explain to people what the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights really does state and why we need to get control of our states now.
Well, the Constitution is simply the founders' chosen method of protecting our natural rights. As the Declaration of Independence said itself, all rights come from God. That's where our rights come from. Government comes next, created by us to protect our rights. Whenever any form of government becomes abusive of those ends, it is our right and our duty to throw it off. And the mechanism that was put in place in our Constitution for doing that is the 10th Amendment. As the Bill of Rights itself makes very clear, to prevent misconstruction, they put in those additional articles. The preamble to the Bill of Rights itself makes very clear what it's for.
And you're a constitutional lawyer yourself. You graduated with high honors from Yale, but anybody can read the 9th and 10th Amendment. I mean, all powers not expressly delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states or the people. And the 9th goes on and expands and says, look, you know, not just the rights that are enumerated here. There's a lot more than just this.
And it says, it shall not be construed. That's a guide to interpretation. You shall not construe the Constitution to mean that only the rights listed here belong to the people, and yet the courts have done just that. And so that's why we can't go begging to the federal courts for permission to exercise our rights or please recognize our rights. I mean, there's no listing in the Bill of Rights of a right to have children or the right to raise your children or the right to marry. But you still have the right to do that. So our rights don't come from the government. It's a bill of shall nots.
And by the way, they've already gotten rid of property rights. Folks, when you pay these property taxes, you don't really own your land. When you pay an income tax, we didn't have that till 1913. It wasn't popularized till the 50s. That's paid directly to the private Federal Reserve. The truth is, our federal government got taken over a long time ago by private corporate interests that are not free market. They've confused the issues. And now I've learned that not just in Chicago, but all over the country, they're under federal orders. They're telling, and you notice he's getting his new education head from Chicago, Obama is, parents, you're not, they actually say this in the paper, you're not trusted to pack your child's lunch. You must buy it from Boss Hog. You must buy it from the company store. And so because it's not in the Bill of Rights that you're allowed to pack your child's lunch, they're saying you don't have that right. That's what's so dangerous about tyranny. We're going to stick our hands down your pants. We're going to put you in radiation bakers. We're going to track everything you buy, sell, and do with no warrants. We're not going to let you pack your child lunch. I mean, the tyranny is just galloping. The dam has broken, Stewart. And now we have the remedy of the 10th Amendment, the people's legislatures, until the same year they gave us the IRS, the same year they gave us the private Federal Reserve. They took our U.S. senators away. For folks that don't know, for the first 170, 100, whatever it was, years of this country, the people elected their legislatures, and the senators U.S. senators were a creature of the state, voted on by the legislature, and the states had so much power they could recall them. And not even Lincoln, burning down half the country, could get those senators away from the states. Well, they got rid of them in 1913 with the 17th Amendment. And so now, imagine, the senators were creatures of the states, and they got Mr. Maddow and the rest of them up there on TV, I mean Rachel Maddow, whatever its name is, telling us there is no state. There is no right, period.
That's right. And the answer is, with your children, pull them out of public school. And the answer is, when it comes to the rights of your states, don't recognize and don't buy into their rhetoric. This is a revitalization of the Confederacy. This is racism. Long before that, from Jefferson's time on, the state stood up and nullified against the Fugitive Slave Act, for example. Northern juries refused to convict those who were sheltering slaves on the Underground Railroad.
Well, what would we do if we got a dictator and the states would line up and say, no, that's what it's for? And all I'm saying is they're trying to sell it again as if it is a second American Civil War, and that if a state has any 10th Amendment rights, that it somehow is calling for secession.
That's right. That's why the military is so key. If we can show the military the original design of the Constitution and get them to see how illegitimate that would be, then they'll stand down and won't do it. And the other side of it is for us to stand up. We want them to stand down and for the states to stand up. And if both sides of the coin do that, the globalists will lead are powerless.
But, I mean, shouldn't the government, Stewart Rhodes, not trust parents to pack their children's lunch? I mean, period. No lunch is allowed. I mean, in our day, we could walk home from school and eat lunch. That's Al-Qaeda. Packing your son or daughter a lunch is Al-Qaeda. Just admit that you're a freak from the past, and so am I, and that it's bizarre to not want to have TSA fondle your wife.
Well, they want to infantilize us all. They want to treat us all like children. Only thing you're allowed to do, the only thing that's legitimate, is to vote. And once you vote, then everything else that the founders wanted us to do is now considered verboten, forbidden and illegitimate.
And you vote for a basket of people like Donald Trump. Well, they're really putting him in there now to pose as the fake populist, kind of like Obama did for the Democrats. This is a guy in the penny stocks. This is a guy hooked in with Schumer. This is a globalist. This is a guy who's declared bankruptcy, had all these wives, on and on and on. He's a guy who loves to take old ladies' property.
That's right. When I worked for the Institute for Justice as an intern one summer in law school, there was a case going through where Donald Trump tried to use eminent domain to seize an old lady's house. She wouldn't sell it to him, so he wanted to take it through the force of government to put a parking garage in for his limos. And thankfully, she had good lawyers, good volunteer lawyers, who kicked his butt.
Well, that's when he says, let's take the oil from Iraq. Folks, we're not getting the oil. The oil company's already got that oil. And we'll be right back. Briefly, again, for those that just joined us, break down what Oath Keepers is and why it's needed. And from a constitutional law perspective, working in Congress as well for Ron Paul. For those that don't know history, for those that don't have a Yale law degree, they're just like sitting ducks for this. We have scientifically focused, crafted, premeditated usurpation, takeover of our liberties. We are being usurped. We are being trampled. What made America so great is burning to the ground right now. And those of us rushing in with the remedy that the founders gave us, that history gave us, we're being renounced as the enemy because we're the people that have the crosses and the spikes and the garlic and the holy water and the sunshine, and the vampire parasites, they don't like it.
That's right. And they want our military and police to be their willing tools of oppression. But if we can wake them up to the truth, one drop of truth is an antidote to an entire bucket full of nonsense and lies. And so if we can tell them the truth, they have the honor and the courage already, we get them to stand down, just as the Eastern military did in 1989. You had mass protest, and the Communist Party finally gave the order to suppress the mass protest, and the military stood down and refused.
But that was wrong. Government's always good. You never stand up against government. That's un-American. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right, and you should always obey your commander-in-chief, is what we're being told right now. But we should follow the example of the East Germans.
No, we should follow. The commander said the UN ordered him to launch that war. Doesn't matter if I've had Ron Paul and others on to break down that it was illegal and was treasonous. We follow the UN's orders now.
That's what they're trying to tell us.
The president is God. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, that's what they're conditioning the military to believe also. I mean, he should be impeached for what he just did. He went to the UN and acted as though he's the president of the world and the United Nations is Congress. Totally ignored the fact we have a national Congress. And that's the trend. Get away from state power, then get away from our national sovereignty also, and go to international organizations. But if the military and police are educated about the constitutional design that we're supposed to be using, they can and will stand down when a certain tipping point is reached.
All right, I want you to go over that. I'm going to give you the floor for the next 8 minutes till this segment's over, but that's key what you just explained. First, they take it from the counties and the states. Then they take it to the federal government. Then they take it away from the Congress that are the guys that pass the laws, issue the money. In fact, reading the Founding Fathers, co-equal was a minority view of the House and the Senate being in the legislative, and then you have the judicial, the courts, and the executive, the president. The majority, and I've read these rulings and statements on air, was the Congress, because it was the greatest grouping of the people's representatives that had the greatest separation of powers. It had the most power, but now it's being rendered ceremonial. So take it from the state to the federal, take it from the Congress, give it to the president, who then says, I did this to empower the UN. You know, they said that 2 weeks ago, that he did this for the credibility of the UN. So it's already happened. And now, if you don't bow down to the UN, you're a traitor.
That's right. And the most important separation of power is between the sovereign states and the national government. They're both dual sovereignties, part of a dual sovereignty system, and the great majority of the power, as the 10th Amendment makes clear, anything not granted to the national government is reserved to the states or the people. And so they've torn that down, and they've brought all power to Washington, D.C., and claim a power to make any rules about anything whatsoever. And then, as you said a minute ago, they take power from Congress and then gravitate it towards the executive branch. Now, he makes rules. You know, stroke of the pen, law of the land, kind of cool. You know, they done by Bush as well. Make executive orders, circumventing Congress. And Congress, as you said a minute ago, has, you look at Article 1, Section 8, it is Congress that has the power to coin money. Congress has the power to make rules for governing the military and capture.
To declare war. It's not the president.
That's right, and declare war and to call for.
They order him as the commander-in-chief, the head general, to go do their orders.
That's right. They decide what to do. They make a decision to go to war.
Can't the military get that chain of command? I mean, it's clear. The president is not the dictator. The Congress tells him what to do. Our founders would never give a dictator that power.
Well, Congress abdicated its responsibility. From the War Powers Act on through the authorization of military force for Bush, they have abdicated and given to the president the authority to make war and make those decisions on his own. So it's partly Congress's fault. But the presidents love it. They say, sure, give me all the power. I'll decide. But now, as we said a minute ago, then what happens is they step outside of our Constitution completely. It's not just within the battle between the different parts of our government. It's now we're going to go to the world government, and we're going to have them decide whether we go and fight and die on foreign soil. So now it's the Congress of the world as the national security apparatus of the UN. They decide when Americans fight and die.